For 35 years, I started every May the same way. I would back my car up to the garage, open the trunk, and haul bag after bag of mulch to the back garden. My lower back would ache for a week afterward, and by September you could barely tell I had laid anything down at all. The soil had swallowed every bit of it. And by the following April, I was already writing buy mulch back onto my list. One spring, my neighbor Margaret stopped by while I was halfway through unloading the trunk. She watched me for a moment and said, "Eleanor, why are you still doing this?" I told her, "Because that is what you do. You mulch." And she smiled and said, "I stopped buying mulch 11 years ago. Come look at my garden." What I found in her beds that afternoon genuinely changed the way I garden. She had scattered seeds, just seeds, and those plants were doing everything I'd been paying for every single spring. Suppressing weeds, holding moisture, feeding the soil, and dropping their own seeds so the whole thing repeated without her lifting a finger. The mulch cycle is something most of us never question. You lay it down in spring, it disappears by midsummer, and by fall it is broken down or washed away entirely. So you buy it again, and the bags get heavier, and the price goes up a little each year. What Margaret had understood is that nature already has a solution to bare soil. These 7 plants have spent thousands of years developing the ability to cover ground, hold moisture, suppress competition, and feed the soil around them. We just never thought to plant them deliberately. If you are new here, welcome to The Gardening Grandma. Hit that subscribe button right now because this is exactly the kind of content I post here. Specific, practical information that actually changes what happens in your garden. Now let us get into these 7 seeds. Number 1, sweet alyssum, the low border that blocks weeds and runs pest control at the same time. Sweet alyssum looks like a pure ornamental, tiny white flowers, a faint honey scent, low and delicate along the front of a bed. I grew it for years without understanding what it was actually doing. The plant forms a dense, flat mat right against the soil. Weed seeds need light to trigger germination, and that mat sits tight enough to the ground to block it before a weed seed ever gets started. I have had beds edged with sweet alyssum where I barely pulled a weed all summer. Not because weeds gave up, but because they never got the signal to begin. Here is what took it from a pretty border plant to something I now grow deliberately. Sweet alyssum attracts hoverflies in serious numbers. The adults feed on nectar. Their larvae eat aphids, thrips, and soft-bodied insects that would otherwise damage your plants. While it is covering your soil, it is running a pest control operation above it at the same time. 2 functions, 1 small plant. When it dies back, it decomposes in weeks. The tissue is soft and nitrogen-rich, which means it feeds your earthworms and soil microbes directly as it breaks down. And before that last generation finishes, the next one is already germinating. Scatter it thickly along the edges of your beds or wherever you have bare soil between taller plants. Water it through germination, and it takes care of itself after that. Number 2, creeping thyme, the living pathway that chemically suppresses weeds. Every day, it is alive. My garden pathways used to be a mud problem in spring and a dust problem in summer. Bare, compacted strips between the beds that I never knew what to do with. Creeping thyme solved that completely. It stays low enough to walk on without damage, which already makes it unusual. But what drew Margaret to it is something most people never learn. Creeping thyme releases aromatic oils from its leaves continuously, especially when warmed by sun. These compounds have a documented suppressive effect on weed seed germination in the surrounding soil. The plant puts out a low-level weed suppressant every single day simply by existing. Bark chips block light, straw blocks light, creeping thyme works at a different level. It inhibits germination chemically, and it does it while it is alive and growing, all season long, not just for the weeks after you laid something down. The soil under a mature mat stays cooler in heat and slightly warmer on cold nights. Moisture retention is comparable to a couple of inches of wood chip mulch, achieved by a living plant rather than a decomposing one. Planted in full sun, it thins out badly in shade. Space plants about 12 inches apart, and within one season, they knit into a solid carpet. Once established, drought-tolerant, and essentially permanent. And because it is a culinary thyme relative, you can trim a handful for the kitchen while it is mulching the garden. 2 uses from one plant. Number 3, Nasturtium. The mulch that protects your soil, traps aphids, and feeds your kitchen. I grew nasturtiums for years purely for the color. Orange and yellow blooms all summer, completely cheerful, and I thought nothing more of them. Then Margaret pointed out what they were doing at soil level, and I went back and started paying closer attention. The leaves are large and shield-shaped, and they sit horizontally, spreading wide and overlapping each other. In a heavy rain, those leaves intercept the water and distribute it gently downward. The soil under a nasturtium patch stays loose and well-structured after a storm because it never takes the direct impact of heavy drops hitting bare ground. For anyone with soils that crust over after rain, this matters more than most people realize. Below the surface, nasturtium roots release compounds into the soil that have a documented suppressive effect on certain soil-borne pathogens, including fungal disease strains. It is protecting the soil chemistry. At the same time, it is protecting the surface. And the aphids love nasturtium and will colonize it in preference to your vegetables. When a stem gets heavily infested, trim it off and the rest of the plant keeps growing. Your food crops stay clean with no spraying. Direct seed only. Nasturtiums hate root disturbance. Press each seed about an inch into the soil and water it in. They germinate quickly, self-seed every season after the first, and the whole plant is edible. Leaves, flowers, and seeds. The pickled seeds taste remarkably like capers. Drop a comment right now and tell me, have you ever deliberately grown any of these as a mulch crop? I read every single comment. And if you have not subscribed yet, please do it now. What is coming in the last 4 plants is where this list becomes something most gardeners have genuinely never encountered. Number 4, buckwheat, the 6-week soil reset between crops. The number to remember about buckwheat is 6, from seed to full flowering cover in 6 weeks. Nothing I know of moves that fast. If you have bare soil in summer, a gap between crops, an empty bed, a patch that finished early, buckwheat closes that gap before weeds have a chance to establish. It is a broad-leafed flowering plant, not a grass, and the bees are devoted to the small white flowers. A bed in full bloom is constantly moving with pollinator activity. When you cut it and lay it on the surface, it decomposes in 3 to 4 weeks in warm conditions. The breakdown is fast enough that it does not tie up nitrogen the way woody mulches can. What you are left with is a dark, crumbly layer that earthworms come to the surface to feed on. And in soils where phosphorus is locked in and unavailable, buckwheat roots release organic acids that unlock it. After you cut the plant, that freed phosphorus stays available for the next crop you plant into that bed. Scatter it thickly, cut it before the seeds fully form if you do not want it spreading, and use it to reset any bed that needs a season of recovery. Number 5, Phacelia, the cold season protector that covers your soil when nothing else will. Margaret walked me over to a corner of her garden in late October, and showed me a patch of feathery blue-purple flowers still going strong while everything else had shut down. I had never seen the plant in my life. Phacelia germinates in cool soil, as low as 5 degrees. That means you can establish it in late autumn, late winter, or early spring, which are exactly the windows when your soil is most exposed. Bare winter soil compacts under heavy rainfall and loses structure that takes years to rebuild. Phacelia covers that ground during those vulnerable months when almost nothing else will grow. Its decomposition rate is one of the fastest of any green manure plant. The leaves are soft and nitrogen-rich, and in warm soil they break down in under 3 weeks. Chop it down, lay it on the surface, and within a month it has disappeared into measurably improved soil with more organic matter and a spike in the fungal activity that benefits the next plants you grow there. The bee attraction is exceptional. Studies consistently rank it among the top plants for honeybee and bumblebee forage because the open flower structure allows short-tongued bees to access the nectar. And it is not related to any major vegetable crop family, so it leaves no disease behind for your brassicas, legumes, tomatoes, or cucumbers. Scatter it thinly. A little seed goes a long way. Rake it in lightly and keep it moist through establishment. After that, it manages itself. Number 6. White clover. The living pathway that feeds your entire garden while it grows. Most gardeners know that clover fixes nitrogen. The roots work with soil bacteria to pull it from the air and deliver it in a form plant roots can use. A mature stand can fix over 100 pounds of nitrogen per acre per year. In a home garden, a well-established clover pathway or bed edge can supply a meaningful fraction of what your neighboring plants need with no fertilizer from you. But the mulching story is what surprised me most. White clover grows to 4 to 8 inches and then stops. Instead of going upward, it puts energy into spreading horizontally. Runners that creep outward, root at nodes, and thicken into a mat so dense that weed seeds landing on it have virtually no bare soil to germinate on. The shallow root network also locks the soil surface in place against erosion after heavy rainfall. Moisture retention under white clover matches 2 to 3 inches of straw mulch, achieved while the plant is actively growing. The soil underneath stays cooler and more consistently moist than bare ground in the same conditions. The pairing I now use everywhere: white clover as an understory beneath tall crops, between your corn, around your tomatoes, along the base of fruit trees. The clover fixes nitrogen for the roots above it, covers the soil those crops leave bare, and draws pollinators into your most productive beds at the same time. Trim it occasionally, the clippings fall as a light nitrogen mulch, and the plant regrows within days. Number 7. Comfrey, the plant. I now consider the most valuable in my entire garden. My dear, I want to tell you about the first summer I cut comfrey and laid it around my tomatoes. I had grown it in a back corner for years and never used it the way Margaret described. I was skeptical. It is a large plant and takes up space, but that summer I cut the first big harvest of leaves, carried the armloads over to the tomato bed, and laid them around the base of 6 plants. By the following week, the leaves had wilted and collapsed flat. Within 2 weeks, they had broken down completely into a dark layer that looked more alive than anything else in the bed. By the end of that season, those 6 tomatoes were the most productive plants I had grown in years. Here is why. Comfrey has a taproot that grows 6 to 8 feet deep, sometimes deeper. At that depth, it is mining minerals that shallow-rooted garden plants simply cannot reach on their own. Potassium, calcium, phosphorus, iron. It draws them up from the subsoil and deposits them into its leaves. When you cut those leaves and lay them around your plants, those minerals become available to the shallow roots of your vegetables and fruit trees. Comfrey is not just covering your soil. It is fertilizing it with nutrients pulled from a depth no garden fork reaches. The potassium content of comfrey leaves by dry weight exceeds farmyard manure, and potassium is what drives fruit development, root strength, and disease resistance. A mature plant can be cut 4 to 6 times per growing season, and those leaves need no composting or preparation. Lay them directly around your plants, and they decompose in 1 to 2 weeks, leaving a dark, nutrient-dense layer right over the root zone. Comfrey is permanent. Even tiny root fragments left in the soil will regenerate. Choose its location thoughtfully, along the edges of your garden, around fruit trees, at the permanent boundaries of your beds, and then let it stay. Give it a fixed home, and it will produce mulch material for the rest of your gardening life. Start from the Bocking 14 variety if you can find it. Once you have one plant, you can propagate it from root cuttings indefinitely. You never need to buy it again. 7 seeds. One garden that covers its own soil, suppresses its own weeds, feeds its own roots, and keeps doing all of it without you hauling a single bag. Sweet Alyssum blocking weed germination along your bed, edges while pest control runs above it. Creeping thyme chemically discouraging weeds across every pathway. Nasturtiums protecting your soil from rain impact and drawing aphid pressure away from your vegetables. Buckwheat resetting your empty beds in 6 weeks and unlocking nutrients as it goes. Phacelia covering the bare ground of winter when your soil is most at risk. White clover threading nitrogen through every pathway and understory. And comfrey standing at the permanent edges, mining the deep soil and returning what it finds to the surface in the most useful form possible. I spent 35 years hauling mulch bags because I did not know these 7 plants could work as a system. Start with one this season. Add another next year. Within 3 growing seasons, your garden will be managing a significant part of its own maintenance, and you will feel it in your back on those first weekends of May when there is nothing heavy left to carry. Leave me a comment and tell me which one you are starting with, and if this helped you, please share it with a gardening friend who is still out there dragging bags every spring. Until next time, happy gardening. Take care of yourselves and take care of those beautiful gardens of yours.